I was once pushed out the back door by my own family, as if I were unworthy of walking through the main entrance. But that night, my mother and sister had no idea that the place they were using to humiliate me was actually property in my name. My name is Pamela Seard. I am 34 years old. And last Saturday night was one of those moments I will never forget. I had just stepped onto the front entrance of the Sterling Hotel when a security guard, polite but firm, stopped me. He checked the guest list, read my name, and told me I was not allowed to enter through the main door. He said I had to go around to the back and use the service entrance reserved for deliveries, kitchen staff, and servers. For the first few seconds, I honestly thought I had misheard him. I stood there, staring through the polished glass into the hotel lobby, where chandeliers cast a warm golden glow across the marble floor, where elegantly dressed guests were laughing and chatting as they made their way into my sister's engagement party. And yet I, the bride-to-be's own sister, was being sent to the back like something that needed to be hidden away. I asked the guard who had given that instruction. He hesitated for a moment before answering. The event organizer. Ma'am, I did not need to ask any more questions to know it was Natalie. My sister did not just want to keep me from standing out on her big night. She wanted me brought in through a door no one would see. The most painful part was not even the humiliation itself. The most painful part was knowing this was not a mistake, nor a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. It was a cold, carefully arranged reminder that in the eyes of my family, I had never belonged at the main entrance. After the guard spoke, I instinctively looked through the glass into the grand lobby. And that was when I saw my mother. She was standing only a few feet away, near the reception desk, in an elegant dress with a glass of champagne in her hand, looking directly at me. Our eyes met clearly. I waited for the smallest reaction, a troubled frown, a step toward me, or at least a guilty shake of the head as if she had no idea this was going to happen. But there was nothing. My mother simply smiled. Not the strained smile of someone caught in an awkward situation. Not a polite social smile. It was a smile of real satisfaction, as if she were finally seeing something unfold exactly the way she had hoped. In that moment, I realized this was not something Natalie had arranged on her own. My mother knew. My mother approved. She may even have helped create it. A mother standing there, watching her daughter be stopped at the door like someone unworthy of entering, without the slightest objection or shame. That scene felt like a perfect summary of my entire life in this family. Natalie was always the one who was welcomed, cherished, and given every open door. I was always the one forced to find the side entrance, to slip through back hallways, to prove that I had the right to exist at all. Looking at my mother's smile in that moment, I understood that tonight was not just Natalie's engagement party. To them, it was also a display of power. A stage on which they wanted to put me exactly where they had always believed I belonged. What made the whole situation so bitter it almost felt absurd was that I was the only one who knew the truth. 6 months earlier, I had finalized the purchase of the Sterling Hotel. It was not part of some revenge plan, and it was not meant to prove anything to my family. It was simply a good business deal. The building had a prime location, a strong brand, a stable operations team, and I saw long-term potential from the very first time I reviewed the file. I signed the papers, completed the transfer of ownership, worked with the management team, reviewed the budget, and adjusted the business strategy. I had become the owner of the Sterling long before I even knew Natalie was dating Bradley. And certainly long before I found out my sister would be hosting her engagement party there. My family did not know any of this. But not because I was hiding it. The truth was, no one had ever asked. No one asked how my work was going, what I was investing in, or what new projects I was pursuing. During family phone calls, holiday dinners, or the rare times we gathered, every conversation always revolved around Natalie. My life was never a topic they cared enough about to truly listen to. So while they were still quietly holding on to an outdated image of me as some dreamy, directionless daughter struggling through life, I had built a career strong enough to buy the very hotel where they stood laughing that night. And that evening, they stopped me at the front entrance of property that was legally mine, completely unaware that they were humiliating the wrong person on land that belonged to me. I did not find out about Natalie's engagement through a family phone call, or from my mother sharing the news with joy. I found out through Facebook, one ordinary evening. While scrolling through my feed after work, I saw a photo of Natalie's hand lifted toward the camera. A 1/4-carat gold ring sparkling under the lights, with a sweet caption that read, "I said yes. Celebration details coming soon." There were hundreds of likes, endless congratulatory comments, and in the middle of all that excitement, I realized I was an outsider. My mother did not call me until 3 days later. And even then, it was not to share the happiness or invite me with even the bare minimum of kindness. Her voice was cold and sharp. As always. "Pamela, I'm sure you've already seen the news. The party is on Saturday at the Sterling. Dress appropriately. And please don't do anything that embarrasses your sister." There was no, "How are you?" No, "I want you there." No, "It would mean a lot if you came." Just an order and a warning. As if I were a risk to be managed, rather than a family member to be valued. I hung up and sat still, staring at the dark screen in my hand. The feeling was not new. It was so old it had become familiar. In my family, Natalie was always the main event, while I was only a footnote in the margins, usually mentioned only when there was a need to correct me, control me, or criticize me. But that phone call still left me choking inside, not because I was hurt, but because it made everything so painfully clear. They truly believed I had no meaningful life of my own, nothing more important to do. And of course I would show up at the exact time, in the exact place, and in the exact role they had assigned to me. If I had to choose one sentence to describe my childhood, it would probably be this: in that house, there were always 2 daughters, but only one of them was ever truly seen. Natalie was the pride, the light, the child my mother spoke about, with shining eyes and a voice full of pride. I was always the one who came second. Always the backup option. Always introduced with vague phrases like, "still trying to figure things out" or "still finding her way." I grew up under a quiet but constant comparison. When Natalie succeeded, it was proof of her talent. When I succeeded, it was luck. When Natalie made mistakes, people were understanding because she was under a lot of pressure. When I made mistakes, it was treated as evidence that I was unstable, weak, or simply did not have what it took. Little by little, I learned to make myself smaller. I stopped talking about the things that excited me, because I knew no one really cared. I stopped hoping to see pride in my mother's eyes, because Natalie was always the one who received that. Even years later, long after I had grown up, I still carried the feeling that I was living in someone else's shadow. The most painful part was that this sense of invisibility did not come from strangers. It came from my own family, the very people who should have been the first to truly see me. And if you have ever felt like the extra person in your own home, leave a comment with the number 1 below. I truly want to know how many people grew up feeling as though they were always placed behind someone else. Because sometimes, simply knowing you are not alone can be a huge comfort. My mother's favoritism was not only visible in her words or her attitude, it showed clearly in the decisions that shaped the future of both her daughters. When Natalie turned 25, my mother gave her $40,000 as a down payment for her first apartment. She smiled brightly and called it an investment in her future. The whole family raised their glasses as if they were witnessing some historic moment. But when I was 25, I found a small motel on the outskirts of town. It had only 10 rooms. It was old and run down, and it needed a great deal of work. But I saw potential in it. I had already prepared a business plan, cost estimates, renovation ideas, and projected cash flow. I was not asking for a handout. I was only asking my mother for a loan so I could buy it. She skimmed through a few pages and then laughed. She said, "Pamela, that's not a business plan. That's a fantasy. Natalie knows how to build a life. You only know how to drift." I still remember the heat rising in my face at that moment, as if my dream had just been crushed right in front of me. But I did not give up. I went to the bank and took out a loan at 18% interest. A rate high enough to wake anyone up from a dream. The first year nearly destroyed me. I did everything myself: front desk, housekeeping, accounting, marketing, repairs, guest care. I barely slept. I rushed through meals. And I lived under constant pressure. But that little motel survived. Then it grew. Then it became profitable. Then it became the foundation for everything I have now. The bitterest part is that from the same mother, one daughter's future was called an investment, while the other daughter's future was dismissed as foolish fantasy. Starting from that 10-room motel, I built my career step by step with almost no support from my family. I learned how to read financial reports, negotiate with contractors, handle operational problems, hire and train staff, and promote my brand in every way I could. When the first property finally became stable, I bought a second one, then a third. Every step was the result of years of late nights, early mornings, debt pressure, constant stress, and decisions where one mistake could have cost me everything. But the strangest part was that throughout all those years, my family barely seemed to notice that anything in my life was changing. Not because I was hiding it. I still showed up for holiday dinners. I still answered when my mother called. I still sat at the same table with them on special occasions. It was just that no one ever asked. The conversation always centered on Natalie, her new job, her new apartment, her boyfriend, her future plans. If I ever said anything about my own work, the conversation was quickly redirected. After a while, I stopped trying to squeeze myself into it. I understood that in their eyes, I was only part of the background. And the ironic part is that while they still held on to the image of me as a woman who was still trying to figure things out, I was quietly signing property deals, expanding my brand, and preparing to acquire the sterling. I no longer waited for anyone's recognition. I simply kept working. Maybe that silence is exactly what made the reversal at the party that night feel so enormous. To them, it was as if I had turned into a completely different person overnight. But the truth is, I did not suddenly change. I just grew up. While they never once chose to look closely, there was a time in my life when I still hoped that even if my mother did not understand me professionally, she would at least be there when I was hurting the most. That was 5 years ago. When my marriage fell apart, I found out David was cheating on me. It was not a vague suspicion. It was clear, undeniable proof. The divorce that followed was brutal, exhausting, and draining in every possible way. Mentally and physically. In a moment of weakness, I called my mother. I thought that at least then, as a mother, she would comfort me. Tell me I did not deserve to be treated that way. Or simply listen. But the first thing she said was, "I told you so. Pamela, you don't know how to choose people." Natalie would never let something like this happen to her. I still remember how long I stayed silent after hearing that. Some words do not just hurt you. They switch something off inside you. I realized that phone call was never going to bring healing. It only left me feeling more ashamed for expecting tenderness from the wrong person. After that day, I stopped calling my mother whenever something major happened in my life. Not because I was rebellious or angry. I was just tired. Tired of begging for something that the other person had no intention of giving. From that moment on, I started rebuilding my life around one simple rule. Never expect rescue from a place that was never safe to begin with. Maybe it was exactly that exhaustion, built up over so many years, that allowed me to stay calm on the night at the Sterling. Because once a person stops hoping, they also stop being so easily wounded by the same old knife. A few days before the party, Marcus, the general manager of the Sterling, sent me an email in an unusually careful tone. He said he needed to inform me about several unusual requests related to guest access control for Saturday night's engagement party. I opened the attachment, and my chest tightened almost instantly. It was a guest management document listing 3 names that had been flagged to use a different entrance. The first 2 were former colleagues of Bradley who were tied to a business dispute. The third name was mine. Next to it was a note in Natalie's own handwriting. Scanned into the file, Pamela Seard, bride's sister. Redirect to service entrance if she appears. Do not allow her through the main lobby under any circumstances. I read that sentence over and over again. My sister did not just refuse to treat me like family. She had placed me in the same category as people who needed to be kept out of sight. A problem to be hidden. A detail that did not fit the perfect image she was trying to stage for the Harrington family and more than 200 guests. Marcus had also left me a separate note. He said the request struck him as highly unusual, especially given my relationship to the hotel, and asked whether I wanted him to intervene. I sat in my office, watching the city lights flicker beyond the window, and felt a very clear kind of anger rising in me. It was not loud or explosive. It was cold and sharp. The moment I saw my name on that list, I knew Saturday night would no longer be an ordinary family celebration. It would be the moment I decided whether I was still willing to keep shrinking myself. I had many options after reading Marcus's email. As the hotel owner, I could have canceled the event immediately. I could have called Natalie directly and forced her to explain herself. I could have told the whole family before the party that the Sterling belonged to me, just to see who would be the one left uncomfortable. Or more simply, I could have chosen not to go at all and let them believe they had successfully pushed me to the margins. But in the end, I chose the hardest option. I let everything unfold exactly as they had planned it. My reply to Marcus was brief. Do not change anything. Let them proceed exactly as planned. I'll handle it myself. I did not choose that path because I wanted to play mind games, or because I enjoyed watching people squirm. I chose it because for the first time in my life, I wanted the truth to step into the light on its own, without me having to shout to prove it. If I had reacted in advance, they would have called me dramatic, unstable, difficult. Just like always, but if I simply showed up, let them treat me exactly the way they truly saw me, and then allowed the truth to turn the entire scene upside down in front of everyone. Then it would no longer be a story about Pamela overreacting. It would be the naked truth about them. And if you have made it this far, please like the video so this story can reach more people. There are so many people out there who have been diminished by their own families. And sometimes, all it takes is seeing one person finally stop making herself smaller to give them strength. As for me, the moment I sent that reply to Marcus, I knew I had crossed into something new. I no longer wanted to fight them for the right to be seen as right. I just wanted to stop making myself small so they could feel comfortable. The next morning, I called Daniel. We had known each other since college. Back when I was still just a girl with dreams, much bigger than the money in my pocket. Daniel was one of the very few people who had witnessed my entire journey of building a career from almost nothing. He is my lawyer now. But more than that, I trust him because he knows who I am, not through gossip or appearances, but through years of real life. When I told him that Natalie had put me on the list to be sent through the service entrance at my own hotel, he went silent for a few seconds, and then said, with obvious anger, that it was insane. He asked why I did not simply reveal everything right away. I told him I did not want them bowing their heads out of fear. And I did not need an apology that would only come once they discovered I had power. Then Daniel asked me something that made me stop and think carefully. Do you want revenge? Or do you want closure? I had been asking myself that same question since the night before. In the end, I told him the truest answer I had. I did not need revenge. I just wanted them to understand that I was not the person they had believed I was all these years. I wanted to stop shrinking myself to fit the little space they had always left for me. After hearing that, Daniel's voice softened. He said that if I was really going to do this, he would come with me, as an old friend attending the party by my side. At the same time, he would bring the full legal documentation proving my ownership of the sterling, in case anyone forced me to prove it. I agreed. Knowing Daniel would be there made me feel steadier. Not because I was weak, but because facing your own family can sometimes be far harder than facing strangers. Saturday night arrived faster than I expected. Around 7 o'clock, I drove to the Sterling just as the last light of sunset faded, leaving a beautiful honey-colored glow across the front of the hotel. I had chosen a simple black dress. Elegant, without being showy. No diamonds. No striking accessories. Only the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. I did not want to walk in looking as though I were preparing for war. I wanted to walk in like someone who fully belonged there. The valet recognized my car, but followed instructions and said nothing. He simply took my keys with a quiet, respectful professionalism. I knew Marcus had told the entire staff not to reveal who I was that night. So, officially, I was just another ordinary guest. I walked up the stone steps at the front entrance and looked through the glass at the grand lobby glowing with light. I could hear laughter, the clink of glasses, the faint sound of string music drifting out. Everything was perfect. Glamorous. Exactly the kind of evening Natalie had always dreamed of. Then the security guard stepped forward, opened the guest list, read my name, and told me I would need to use the service entrance at the back. He spoke very politely, but every word still felt like a cut against my skin. I asked who had given that instruction, and he only replied that it came from the event organizer. I did not argue. I just looked through the glass one more time. Saw my mother still standing there. Saw Natalie laughing with the guests. Saw their world moving as though I was not worthy of crossing the main threshold. Then I nodded and quietly said that I would use the back entrance. Not because I accepted the place they had assigned to me, but because I had already decided to let them carry their arrogance all the way to its end. The service entrance of the Sterling is at the back of the building, near the delivery area and the corridor that leads into the main kitchen. The air there smelled of cleaning solution, freshly baked bread, and steam rising from pots of soup. A complete contrast to the expensive perfume and crystal lights in the main lobby. I pushed open the heavy metal door and stepped into a kitchen running at full speed. Within seconds, the whole space seemed to freeze. One sous chef stopped mid-slice. A server carrying a tray of champagne stood still. And Executive Chef Rivera fell completely silent. They all recognized me. And I knew they had all seen the guest routing document as well. They understood why I was coming in through that door. That was what made the atmosphere feel so heavy. I did not want any of them to feel they had to choose sides or be forced to witness yet another painful scene. So I gave a small smile and told them to keep working. That tonight I was only a guest. But they still looked at me with a mix of respect and sympathy. Rivera quietly said that the salmon tonight would be excellent, as if he were both reassuring me and letting me know he understood exactly what was happening. I told him I trusted him. then continued down the corridor behind the kitchen toward the side entrance of the ballroom. Through the small glass window in the door, I could see the room glowing in gold. The tables covered in elegant linens, the string quartet playing Vivaldi, and Natalie standing at the center, like the leading lady of the evening. I stood there for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and smoothed the folds of my dress. I was not bitter. I was not trembling. There was only one feeling that came through with perfect clarity. I had walked through enough side doors in my life already. And this time, I was not stepping in just to remain a shadow. I slipped into the party from the side entrance, moved along the edge of the wall, and chose a quiet spot where I could stay unnoticed but still see everything clearly. At first, no one paid attention to me. In my understated black dress, with no name tag and no spotlight pointed at my face, I became exactly what they had always wanted me to be, someone easy to overlook. But that very position gave me the clearest view of all. I saw my mother standing near the gift table, happily telling guests and members of the Harrington family about Natalie's accomplishments, as if she were presenting a masterpiece she had created herself. I saw Natalie glide from one group of guests to another with her perfect smile, while Bradley followed beside her like an expensive accessory. Then came the speeches. Bradley asked everyone for their attention, and Natalie stepped onto the small stage with a glowing expression and began speaking about love, family, and gratitude. She thanked my mother, thanked the Harringtons, thanked the friends who had truly shown up. Then she glanced in my direction, only for a moment, and said in a voice heavy with implication that not everyone in the family understood the value of commitment. I knew immediately she was referring to my divorce. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the room. Then my mother stood up and added her own remarks, calling Natalie the greatest pride of her life. And when one guest casually asked whether she had 2 daughters, my mother answered smoothly that Natalie was her pride. While Pamela was still finding her way, I stood there, silent, my fingers tightening slightly around the stem of my champagne glass. Not because those words were new. They were very old. But hearing them spoken aloud in front of more than 200 strangers, inside my own hotel, I understood something all the way down to my bones. If I stayed silent tonight the way I always had before, I would be the one confirming the invisible role they had assigned to me. About 20 minutes after the speeches, Natalie finally came over to me. Maybe she realized I had not disappeared the way she expected. Or maybe she simply wanted to make sure I was still standing exactly where she thought I belonged. In the shadows, she stopped in front of me with a smile as thin as a blade and asked if I had actually come, as though my presence were somehow hard to believe. I congratulated her on the engagement. She thanked me, then immediately shifted her tone and said that events like this could sometimes feel overwhelming for certain people. I told her I was doing just fine. She sipped her champagne, looked me up and down, and said that Bradley and his family were very traditional, that they valued achievement and status. So she hoped I understood why they had to be selective about how guests made their entrance. The moment she said that, I understood Natalie felt no shame at all. She truly believed sending me through the service entrance was reasonable, even necessary, to protect her image. Then she criticized my black dress for being too gloomy for a celebration and asked how I had managed to get in, nearly slipping up and revealing that she herself had instructed security to block me from the front entrance. I answered very calmly that I had used exactly the entrance she requested. For a brief second, Natalie's expression faltered, not out of guilt, but out of surprise. Maybe she had expected me to leave in humiliation. Maybe she had never imagined I would walk through the kitchen, past the staff corridors, and still stand there with my back straight and my eyes unwavering. Behind her shoulder, I saw Bradley. He had heard almost the entire conversation, and the look on his face was anything but comfortable. Natalie did not notice, but I did. For the first time that night, I saw a small crack appear in the flawless picture she had worked so hard to create. The moment Natalie walked away, my mother appeared as if she had been waiting for exactly that opportunity. She pulled me into a corner near the service hallway, private enough that others could not clearly hear us, but still open enough that I could not react strongly without being seen as causing a scene. Her voice was low and sharp, the same voice she always used whenever she wanted to remind me how well-behaved I was expected to be. She asked what I was doing there, as if attending my own sister's engagement party were somehow suspicious behavior. I told her I was simply there for the party. She frowned and said I knew perfectly well what she meant, then warned me not to ruin Natalie's night. I said I had not done anything at all. She looked at my dress with clear disapproval and said I should have dressed better so I would not embarrass the family in front of the Harringtons. Without thinking, I asked, "Which family?" "Mom." The words had barely left my mouth when Marcus appeared. His timing was perfect. His manner was calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He apologized for interrupting and said there was an issue with the catering that needed approval from someone on the management side. My mother barely looked at him, annoyed. She told him to go handle it himself because she was speaking with her daughter. Marcus did not move. Instead, he turned to me, his voice impeccably professional, and said, "Miss Seard, may I speak with you for a moment?" Just those 2 words were enough to make my mother freeze. She repeated, "Miss Seard," as if it were the first time in her life she had heard her own surname attached to me with respect. At that moment, I felt completely calm. I knew the door was about to open. Not the glass front door of the hotel lobby, but the door to the truth they had kept shut for 30 years. Marcus did not hesitate. Right there in front of my mother, with Natalie just stepping closer and a few nearby guests beginning to pay attention, he spoke in an even, clear voice and said that the Atlantic salmon shipment had a quality issue. So as the owner of the hotel, would I approve replacing it with the king salmon from reserve stock? The words "owner of the hotel" dropped into the air like the strike of a metal bell. My mother went pale instantly. Natalie froze, her hand tightening around Bradley's arm until her knuckles turned white. I did not look at either of them right away. I answered Marcus first, in the calm voice of someone who handled decisions like this every week. Use the king salmon, and switch to a citrus beurre blanc instead of the dill sauce. It would suit the dish better. Marcus nodded, dipped his head slightly, and walked away. Only then did I turn to face my family. Natalie was the first to speak, her voice sharp with panic, asking what exactly Marcus had just called me. Bradley asked her if she had known about this. Natalie stammered that it was impossible, that I did not own anything. I said, very calmly, that I had bought the sterling 6 months ago, and if anyone needed proof, the property records were public. Around us, conversations began to fade. People stopped laughing, stopped drinking, stopped pretending not to notice. Somewhere, a glass shattered. A few phones came out, no doubt to look it up. In that moment, for the first time in 34 years of living in that family, my mother and sister truly looked at me. Not with pity, not with that corrective, superior tone, not as though I were a problem to be managed, but with shock. They had just realized that the woman they pushed to the back entrance was not the weaker one. I had been standing there all along. They had simply never chosen to see me. The silence had barely begun to settle when Eleanor Harrington stepped closer. From the way people instinctively moved aside for her, I could tell she was the kind of woman who never needed to raise her voice to command a room. She asked whether I truly was the owner of the sterling. I told her yes. And not just the sterling, but 3 other hotel properties as well. Her expression barely changed, but her eyes did. She turned to my mother and repeated exactly what she had been told before, that my family lived modestly, and that I was still struggling to find my way. My mother stammered that she did not know. Eleanor replied coldly that she found that very hard to believe. Right as Natalie lost control and demanded that I produce proof, Daniel appeared beside me as though he had been waiting for that exact moment. From his leather briefcase, he pulled out the full file transfer papers, corporate registration documents, and ownership confirmation records. Eleanor took them and read through them quickly, then said loudly enough for the nearby guests to hear that the sterling had been fully transferred to Pamela Seard 6 months earlier. With no partners, no outstanding debt, and sole ownership. The crowd around us seemed to stop breathing. My mother visibly shrank into herself. Natalie had gone so pale that her blush had nearly disappeared. Eleanor looked directly at my mother and asked, almost word by word, why a mother would allow her own daughter to be sent through the service entrance of a hotel that she herself owned. No one could answer. And in that moment, what was exposed was not only my true position, it was the entire way my family had twisted the story of who I was for years. Lifting Natalie up by pushing me down. The strange thing was that when every eye in the room finally turned toward me, I did not feel triumphant at all. Not in the way people usually imagine in stories about revenge. I did not want to grab the microphone, throw anyone out of the hotel, or cancel the party. My mother grabbed my arm, almost pleading but still deeply selfish, saying that I was humiliating the family and needed to stop. I gently removed her hand and said something I probably should have said years ago. I was not the one humiliating them. They had done that to themselves. Natalie, in a panic, asked what I was going to do next. Whether I was planning to ruin her night out of revenge. I looked at both of them, and for the first time I did not feel anger rising in me. I only felt that the exhaustion was gone, replaced by a kind of calm that was steady and unshakable. I told them I had not come there to prove I was better than anyone. I had not come to steal Natalie's spotlight either. I had come because they believed I was beneath them, and I was no longer willing to accept that. I reminded them that they had put my name on a blacklist, forced me to use the back entrance of my own hotel, and that my mother had smiled while it happened. Whenever they were ready to tell the truth about why they had treated me differently for 30 years, I would listen, but I would never again return to being the invisible daughter. Neither of them could say a word. And that was probably my greatest victory that night, not making them fall apart, but finally speaking the truth without trembling. I left the party through the front entrance, the very door people had said I was not worthy of using just a few hours earlier. A staff member opened it for me with quiet respect. And when the cool night air touched my face, I knew something inside me had changed forever. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls from my mother, a flood of messages from Natalie, and a call from Daniel saying that the Harrington family had spent hours in discussion. The wedding still went ahead in the end, but the prenuptial agreement was completely rewritten, and Natalie no longer had access to the future she had once believed was guaranteed. Later, my mother sent me a letter. It was not exactly an apology, more an admission that she was trying to understand how everything had ended up this way. We started talking again. Slowly. Awkwardly. With long silences between us. Once a month, she calls. On one recent call, she asked me about my new hotel project. It was the first time in my life that my mother had ever asked how my work was going. Natalie is still more distant, but I no longer chase her approval. The greatest thing that night at the Sterling gave me was not a dramatic public reversal. It was freedom. I realized that I had spent far too much of my life wasting energy waiting for other people to recognize my worth. The truth is, some people never will, no matter how hard you try. And when you stop performing for an audience that never truly cared in the first place, that is when you finally begin living for yourself. I am no longer the invisible daughter. I am simply Pamela Seard, a woman who built her own life with her own hands. And that is more than enough. If my story resonated with you, leave a comment and share your own experience with family and the boundaries you have had to set. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories ahead, because there are still so many more stories to tell about hurt, self-respect, and how we rise up to reclaim our own worth.